So in the last session, we discussed some general concepts about the bioremediation. Now, we will focus on the different strategies that can be used for treating contaminated sites, especially soil contamination. And here, a workflow of the different sections in the bioremediation or different bioremediation strategies is actually represented in that schematic representation, in which the contaminated sites which you want to treat is given at the first point. So normally these sites will be contaminated by different hazardous or recalcitrant or xenobiotic compounds, which we want to remove from the environment as a part of the bioremediation. And the initial step in the bioremediation is the sampling and the physico-geological characterization of that site. And so if a site is contaminated, soil or water, whatever, that you need to sample the site for detecting the presence of the concerned contaminant, and also to analyze the different physico-geological factors which is prevalent in that environment, so that an optimal strategy for treatment can be developed. And as a part of the sampling, you can see the detection of the environmental pollution and toxicity is done using different methods. And the main method that is used for environmental toxicity detection or pollution detection is use of biosensors, which we had already discussed in the previous session. So there are various types of biosensors, all cell-based, nucleic acid-based, enzyme-based, or antibody-based. Different technologies were based, technology-based biosensors were available for detecting the presence of environmental pollutants. And so you can use biosensors. Here, the presence of undefined pollutants, if any, then what will you do? Then you can't detect a specific, if it is a specific pollutant that is already known to you, you can use any of the strategies based on biosensors. But if it is a unknown pollutant, you don't have any previous knowledge of that one, then such already existing biosensor based methods may not be useful. So what you can do is you will try to detect the general toxicity of the site. For example, the carcinogenic nature, maybe in the case of a site which is heavily contaminated with some pesticides or some unknown compound, and if there are some symptoms of disease development from that area, then you can test the soil or water for some biological activities, like development of a cancer or some toxic effects or some other effects on the environment or adverse effect on the environment. And based on that biological effectiveness, you can say that, okay, the site is contaminated with, or site is having some influence of adverse effect from some chemicals or other pollutants. Then the nature and concentration of the pollutants needs to be determined. Then toxicity and toxicity of the pollutants for living organisms, if any, that needs to be estimated. So all these things needs to be done as a part of a assessment of the toxicity effects of such pollutants on the environment. Then once it is done, then you will look for measures of already existing measures for existing measures, if any, for bioremediation. So if there is already existing or non-catabolic processes which is available for treating a particular pollutant, then you can use that pathway. But for most of the xenobiotic compounds, there may not be any single pathway that can be identified. In some cases, at least, we can say that there are some already non-established pathways in a combination of enzymes, just like the case of a superbulk, which removes hydrocarbons for petroleum degradation, Pseudomonas butida. There are already the pathway with a combination of different enzymes which is simultaneously incorporated using genetic engineering in Pseudomonas is used. And that is on the knowledge of the existing pathways or pathways that is used for such process. So if the pollutant can be removed, or if it can be treated using an existing catabolic pathway, you have to identify that pathway. You can look into available biocatalytic or biodegradation pathways which is available. There are some sites or some databases in which you can look for such biocatalytic or biodegradation pathways or networks available. Then computational biology or systems biology approaches which is used for such bioremediation, if any, for the non-pollutants, then that can be adopted. So that is the existing knowledge about the degradation pathways. And if you have that already identified catabolic pathways present, then you can employ that one. Then catabolic potential of the contaminated site, if any. For example, for the site itself, there may be different indigenous population or indigenous microorganisms which is present. For the catabolic potential of the contaminated site means for every soil, for example, a contaminated soil may have its own normal population, which may have its own biological activities or biodegradative pathways, which is prevalent in that one. And that is a catabolic potential of the contaminated soil itself, which may contribute to natural degradation or removal of the contaminants. Then that can be identified using functional genome arrays or real-time PCRs, which identifies existing genes which is present in the organisms, which is already available in the site. Different types of molecular biology-based techniques can be used for. Then the next point is if such catabolic potential is not available in the existing site or in the natural environment, then you can try for exogenous biocatalysis, or if there is already available pathways were not present in the naturally existing organisms, then you can import something from the external environment, from some other site, or you can introduce a foreign organism with a metabolic pathway which is already known. That can be introduced to the site. So an exogenous biocatalytic pathway based population can be introduced. So that is the next one, in which we will use some cultivation based techniques, using which you will use different metagenomic approaches for obtaining some already identified organisms from some other sites, and which will be introduced subsequently into the treatment site. And we will see that in the next session. For example, here we can see that the feasibility study of the treatment, which may taking into consideration of different strategies, and the treatment strategy is actually based on natural attenuation. Natural attenuation means the role of the naturally existing organisms in the environment on the treatment. That is the natural attenuation process. Then biostimulation and bioaugmentation. In case of biostimulation, the naturally existing organisms will be stimulated for a better performance using some other supplementation. Whereas bioaugmentation is actually introduction of some new or foreign microbe from other site, which is not normally present in that site, will be introduced into the site by bioaugmentation method, and we will see that details in the next slides. So, so you will decide a strategy for the treatment, whether it should be based on naturally existing organisms or a natural process, or if it is a biostimulation strategy in which you will enrich the activity of the existing organisms, or the other one, whether you are going for supplementing the soil with some other exogenous population of microbes for a treatment, which is actually based on bioaugmentation. So these are the different strategies that is employed. Now, here, once the strategy is decided, you will go for the bioremediation treatment, and the treatment effectiveness can be monitored and validated using the biosensors, which detect the subsequent decline or decrease in the in the degradation and transformation effects. Then there are other metabolomics and proteomics based or transcriptomics based methods for detection of these reduction in the pollutants. Then fingerprinting based or phylogenetic arrays, oligonucleotide arrays based, or community genome array based techniques, or real-time PCR based techniques, or fingerprinting based techniques. There are various techniques which is used for assessing the effectiveness of the degradation of the concern, or the efficiency of biodegradation in the concerned site. So these are the different bioremediation strategies that is employed nowadays. Now you will see the details. So any doubts in the previous slide? Hello? Hello? Clear ആണോ? Hello? Sound കേട്ടുന്നില്ല. Hello?
Sir, clear.
Clear ആണോ? Okay, okay. Then the bioremediation can be classified into different types based on the site of treatment, the nature of the treatment. Here, the natural bioremediation, which means it is using the remediation, natural remediation, which is actually occurring in the environment by the indigenous population, where external intervention is not there. Okay, or any other engineering interventions is not there. Whereas in ex situ treatment, examples are land farming, soil composting, biopiles, etc. Then excite reactors, etc. These are all ex situ treatments in which the contaminated, for example, soil or whatever sample that is available, or the contaminated material is actually taken to another treatment site, ex situ, and treated at that site. So it is not treated on the site of contamination. So it is treated at another site, like that land farming or soil composting or biopiles, where the waste or the contaminated soil, etc., will be aggregated together at a different point, and it will be treated at that site. So the examples are land farming, soil composting, biopiles, and site bioreactors. Whereas in case of in situ treatment, the in situ treatment is actually on-site treatment in which the treatment is done on the site of contamination. So if it is a very large scale contamination, which you can't actually move from one site to another for treatment, then it is better to treat it on the site. And the methods that is used is biostimulation and bioaugmentation. Again, it can be classified as natural and intervention based techniques. The natural is it is the in which the natural treatment of bioremediation is the technique in which natural measures or natural degradation pathways were actually used, in which a human intervention is not done. Whereas intervention based bioremediation, they are further classified based on the type of the materials or sites that you are treating. And for surface soil contamination and sludges, there are different processes like slurry process, land farming, soil composting, and land banking. Then when we come to the unsaturated surface soils, subsurface soils means the soil behind or below the immediately below the surface soils. So which is not actually available, or the aeration is not available at that site that's below the surface soils, that is subsurface soil. And that means you need to go for additional measures in which supplementation with oxygen is required. So the biovending is the strategy that is used for the treatment of subsurface soils or unsaturated subsurface soils. Then again, further below we have saturated subsurface soils, in which it will be almost filled with the water and at the level of water table below the soil, in which the soil will be saturated with water and other things. Then that can be treated with the plume source management and different strategies. So bioremediation may be natural or intervention based methods. And when we are actually engineering something for the treatment, that becomes the intervention based method. And these are the examples of intervention based methods. Then in the case of technology transition, in the choice of which technology that you want to adopt, whether it's an in situ method or an ex situ method. That is a here we can see that if it is a relative, the pollution nature of the pollution is a relatively time unrestricted, time unrestricted. That is the pollution is actually going on, continuously going on, and it is not for example, take the case of an oil tanker crash or some other event in which a large quantity of the hydrocarbon pollutant is actually immediately released at a particular site. So in that case, it is a local contamination which is occurring at a very short time or during a very short period. That can be, or it is a that contamination is actually occurring at a high concentration within a short time on a localized area, and that can be removed to some sites, and you can try for ex situ contamination because the concentration is high. It is occurring in a very short period of time, and also it is occurring only in a localized area from which you can collect the sample. Whereas if you are take the case of a river contamination or an oil spill in the sea, something like that, in which a very large area is contaminated, or a factory which is polluting some area for a long period of time. In that case, it is a relatively time unrestricted. The pollution or the contribution to that area, the pollution is going on. And again, there is points like, for example, from the mines, there may be acid mine drainage and other things. So, in which during the working of these mines, there will be continuous supply of these different types of pollutants and acids into the environment. So, if it is time relatively time unrestricted process, so means it's a going on process. Pollution is continuously going on at smaller quantity, not in very high concentration, and for a longer period. Then it is better to use an in situ technique because you can't move that contaminated soil or water into another site for treatment within a short period. So that is the choice of the treatment method. You have to decide whether it is a very short, heavily contaminated or a highly concentrated contaminant, or a steady supply of a low concentration contaminants for a longer period. And then you can decide on which technique, like in situ or ex situ technique, to be used for the treatment. Now, land farming. Land farming is a simple technique in which contaminated soil is excavated and spread over a prepared bed and periodically tilled or mixed until pollutants were degraded. So the pollutants were excavated and actually it is transported to some point or treatment point. Then it is spread over a prepared bed, and periodically it is tilled or mixed for aeration purpose, and that process will continue until proper degradation is achieved. So that type of method is known as land farming. The goal is to stimulate the indigenous organisms. We are not supplementing anything or any microbial consortia or microbial population from external sources. So that means this is the stimulation of the existing indigenous population using this aeration and mixing. Proper supply of oxygen will be there, and it will enhance the degradation of these waste or materials which is present in the land farming site. So the goal is to stimulate the indigenous biodegradative microorganisms and facilitate their aerobic degradation, facilitate the aerobic degradation of the contaminants. In general, the practice is limited to the treatment of a superficial about 10 to 35 centimeter of the soil. So only very small layer of the soil, superficial soil, is treated in such a manner. And this land farming has the potential to reduce monitoring and maintenance cost as well as cleanup liabilities. It has received much attention as a disposal alternative. Means from the cost effectiveness point of view and further treatment measures or further cleanup liabilities at the treatment site, this will incur low cost. So that means it is a highly appreciated technique for treating the or ex situ treatment of the contaminants. From this picture, this is a schematic representation of the different layers which is present, and this from this picture you can see that there is a clay layer at the bottom. Then there is a high density polyethylene HDPE lining, and that lining is actually done for preventing the leaching of the soluble components, or through the leachate, nothing will be leached to the soil or it will not drain to the subsurface waters and even to the aquifers. Here, this is the sand layer, and even perforated pipes will be provided for collecting the leachates and even supplying oxygen, whatever you can use that one. Perforated pipes which is layered in this clay layer. Then here you have the soil or waste that needs to be treated, which is layered over the prepared bed. So this is the bed that is prepared, over which you will arrange, you will spread that material to be treated, for example, contaminated soil or waste, and periodically it will be mixed or tilled for providing further aeration, and the sprinklers will provide water, sufficient water, so that the organisms which is present in this site, or natural or indigenous organisms which is present in the site, will degrade, and that will be stimulated using this supply of oxygen and mixing or tilling, and then supply of water or using sprinklers. It will stimulate the growth of the organisms and further or enhance the degradation of that pollutants. So this is the method of land farming that is employed for the treatment. So this is the tilling of a land farming site at large scale, where soil, contaminated soil, is actually spread on land farming site, and then tilled or mixed periodically for stimulating the natural or indigenous population. The next point is about composting. For the composting, actually, it's a technique that involves combining contaminated soil with non-hazardous organic materials such as manure or agricultural waste or some supporting materials. And the presence of these organic materials support the development of a rich microbial population, and elevated temperatures is characteristic of this composting. So usually in the compost piles, the temperatures will rise, and normally the temperature stable or thermophilic organisms will be prevalent in such compost piles. And the presence of these organic materials, which is supplemented in that agriculture using in the form of manure or agricultural waste, will support the development of a rich microbial population, and also it supports that elevated temperatures or high temperatures which is required for the growth of such a organism. So that is a idea of composting. Biopiles is another one, and these are the hybrids of land farming and composting. Essentially, engineered cells will be constructed, separate, a cellular or modular structure will be constructed as a aerated compost piles. So the technology of the composting is also done, and it also uses compartmentalized different treatment sites, and typically used for the treatment of surface contamination with the petroleum hydrocarbons. So it is used for soil, especially surface or soil contamination with the petroleum hydrocarbons. This technique is employed, and there are a refined version of the land farming that tend to control physical loss of the contaminants by leaching and volatilization. So two things need to be prevented. That is the leaching of the partially degraded contaminant through to the soil and aquifers needs to be prevented, and also releasing of these toxic components to the air in the volatile form is to be prevented. And for that purpose, this type of techniques were used, especially for soil contaminated with petroleum hydrocarbons. Then biopiles provide a favorable environment for the indigenous aerobic and anaerobic microorganisms. So this is the idea of biopiles. I will show you a picture. This is a soil biopile for bioremediation in which multiple compartments of treatment sites were set up. And as I mentioned, the leaching to the soil or the under aquifers is actually prevented by the HDP lining and clay layer and other things, so that it will be actually the contaminant and the treatment in that compost pile is actually limited to that particular site. So the release of the leachates and even toxic or volatile components to the environment will be prevented in that system. Another one that we listed is bioreactors or slurry bioreactors, and or aqueous reactors are used for ex situ treatment of contaminated soil and water pumped up from the contaminated plumes, or if the contamination is done at a subsurface level or underground water body, then that needs to be contaminated water uh, from the aquifers or a deep well needs to be taken out and it needs to be treated. And in that case, an ex situ bioreactor is of use. Bioremediation in reactors involve the processing of the contaminated solid materials, soil or sediment or sludge or water through an engineered containment system. So these are engineered bioreactors through which you will pass the material like soil or sediment or sludge or water. What all the contaminated materials need to be passed through a engineered reactor system in which an enhanced degradation is actually done. So that type of slurry reactors or bioreactors were used for, especially for the treatment of water or contaminated water bodies, means underground water bodies. So here one example is actually there. For example, in the underground water body, there is a sludge or soil or contaminated that will be taken to the slurry reactor. These are the continuous agitator, and in the slurry form, these will be mixed and which will enhance the degradation. And finally, decontaminated sludge will be passed through a clarifier, and again this will be passed to the soil. Sludge out of this will be passed to the soil because it's already treated, and the water will be discharged from the clarifier. So this is the schematic representation of a slurry bioremediation system. Then the next one is the treatment of subsurface soils. Distinct regions of contamination were present. First one is a plume of vapors in the soil layer. So in the soil itself, there will be some top layers where uh, air is trapped or air is available. Aeration is available at the top layers of the soil. So at that layer, the contaminants may present in the air itself, in the top layers of the soil where air is available, air or different gases are available. A plume of vapors which is contaminated may be available. Then below that, there is a groundwater solute. So in that case, the groundwater will be contaminated where such aerated soil is not available. Below that, there will be groundwater that may be contaminated. And the region that contains the source of the contamination. So there is a different regions of contamination in a underground or subsurface soil contamination. First is the, okay, let me see whether at the bottom portion there will be the underground contaminant which is present, from which the contaminant or the pollutant will be released to the water. So water will be polluted, and again above that water layer there will be soil layer, and that soil will have air in it or trapped air in it, and that air also may be contaminated with that pollutant. So there are different layers, different areas in which subsurface soil contaminants were present. So these are some biosurfactants. Biosurfactants you might have already learned in your microbiology classes. There are different peptides, lipids, then glycolipids, lipopeptides, glycoproteins. So there are biosurfactants, and they are actually used in soil washing. Maybe you might have learned about microbial mechanisms or systems for treating the underground water supplies using the biosurfactants which is applied. So the effect is that usually it will reduce the surface tension so that even the oil, there are MEOR, that is microbial enhanced oil recovery, which might be not known to you, in which biosurfactants that is produced by the microorganisms will release that underground petroleum products, which is available underground, and it will be made more available, and it will be released from that trapped soil or around areas, and that will be made more available, and because of the reduced surface tension by the biosurfactants, so that it will be pumped out through the oil wells. So anyway, this type of biosurfactants were also used for it's a soil washing, and then decrease interfacial and surface tension. So it will decrease the interfacial and surface tensions of that internal water and petroleum, whatever, which is present in the underground soils, and there will be rocks and crevices and other things. So in which these water or oil, etc., are trapped, and the reducing the surface tension will release them from that area, which will enable further uh, uh, better pumping out of that from the well. So this is it. So solubilize hydrophobic organic pollutants as well as metals. So this is having many rules. So it will release water or oils and even organic pollutants and metals which is trapped in the subsurface or soils will be released using these pseudo solubilization or by reducing the surface tension, and it will be made more available and you can easily extract from that area. Then both in situ and ex situ biosurfactants are available. Then production methods are employed. This is it will reduce cost. For example, you can initially instead of supplying a biosurfactant which is already produced outside, you can introduce such organisms which will produce biosurfactants into the wells, and which, the growth and activity of that organisms will release biosurfactants in situ, and that biosurfactants will enable the or solubilization of and release of the petroleum products or the even pollutants which is present in the uh, underground soils. The best use of in situ production is the microbial enhanced oil recovery. That is the example in which the reduction in the surface tension will release the trapped hydrocarbons which is present in the oil wells. That is a MEOR. So one example is Bacillus species strain RS1 and the Bacillus subtilis species spicini, that is another strain, were injected with nutrients into the limestone petroleum reservoirs. So that organisms, which are the biosurfactant producers, will be injected along with required nutrients into the limestone petroleum aquifers reservoirs, which is present underground, and that induced lipopeptide production to lower that interfacial tension between the hydrocarbon and aqueous phase to enhance the hydrocarbon recovery. So that organisms which produce these lipopeptide biosurfactants, which will reduce the interfacial tension between the soil and rocks and crevices, and again and aqueous spaces, and so that the oil will be released effectively and it can be extracted from that oil wells. Then the next one is unsaturated subsurface materials. So this is another one in which here is the groundwater gradient that is shown, and this area is take it as the area of contamination, underground contamination. There is a underground water area, water gradient, and underground soil and water. That area is actually contaminated. So you can set up a system of bioventing. Bioventing will provide nutrients for the growth of organisms, aeration using air flows. So nutrients will be supplied, air will be supplied, and to the contaminated site, which will effectively enhance the microbial activity in this area. So it's an in situ process, and that will lead to the enhanced degradation of the pollutant. So this is another example. Here, soil gas monitor is actually installed here. This is a groundwater monitoring well, and this is the contaminated site. And low rate air and co-metabolite or nutrients. Air and nutrients will be introduced or injected into that contaminated site through wells. And this is actually a stimulation process by supplementing air and nutrients, that is co-metabolites. So which will enhance the activity of the microbes and which will degrade the compound in a better fashion. And it will be continuously monitored using different monitoring systems. So this is an example of a unsaturated subsurface material treatment using bioventing. Bioventing is the most common in situ treatment that involves supplying air and nutrients through wells to the contaminated soil to stimulate the indigenous bacteria. Bioventing employs low air flow rates and provides only the amount of oxygen necessary for the biodegradation while minimizing the volatilization and release of the contaminants into the atmosphere. So the point is that it is a stimulation process in which nutrients and air is supplied, but the airflow is controlled in such a way that only required amount of air is provided, not additionally, because if you are supplying extra air, extra ventilation, if it is done, it will take out the volatile toxic components from that well. So to reduce that one, only required oxygen or required aeration for the growth of the indigenous population which is present at the site is given, and that is actually monitored. So this is the point of the idea of a bioventing. So oxygen necessary for the biodegradation while minimizing the volatilization and release of the contaminants to the atmosphere. Then it works for simple hydrocarbons and can be used where the contamination is deep under the surface. So through a well, you can introduce these nutrients and air deep into the subsurface soils where the or the site of contamination, so that the indigenous population will get a better nutrients and air for an enhanced growth and or a stimulated growth and activity for the degradation of the compounds. So this is a pump and treat biostimulation method, an existing practice. So the bioventing method is actually done where pump and treat, in which the contaminant or, for example, water, contaminated water in the underground is actually taken out first, then treat and reintroduce. So this is one method, pump and treat, and then it will be recirculated. So this process of treatment of what the contaminated water bodies or subsurface water bodies is actually done using a designed system in which the contaminated water is pumped out, then treat, then reintroduce. So this is actually a type of biostimulation. So here, this is an example in which a contaminated soil and contaminated water with contaminant is there. And here, oxygen and nutrient source, which is present in the external environment. There is a bioreactor. So this is the groundwater. Groundwater will be taken out for treatment. Then using a bioreactor, it will take out, then nutrients and oxygen is supplied, and that will be introduced through injection pipes into the contaminated sites. So this will enhance the activity. Again, it will be taken out. So this process will continue under the until the level of the pollutant is reduced to a significant level at a later stage. So that can be monitored using various or as we discussed in the flowchart earlier. The final stage is the validation process or the verification process, whether your treatment is effective or not. So if your treatment is effective, then the level of the contaminant will be progressively reducing during the course of treatment. And at some point, you can identify from by analyzing the sample from this point, you can see that okay, now the contaminant is removed. So this is the process of a pump and treat method. One second. So this is a multi-component treatment system. The theory is same, and here the contaminated soil is there, vacuum pump for aeration, nutrient addition, then biofiltration, then absorption on activated carbon, combustion. So along with the pump and treat method, biofiltration, absorption, all other different types of methods will be employed simultaneously. This is a multi-component treatment system that is used. The next one is about biosparging, and biosparging involves the injection of air under pressure below the water table to increase the underground or the groundwater oxygen concentrations and enhance the rate of biological degradation of contaminants by naturally occurring bacteria. So biosparging is actually the injection of air and air under pressure to the water table, and that will increase the groundwater oxygen concentration, which subsequently enhance the rate of biological degradation. So here, pressurized air is injected to the water table below. Biosparging increases the mixing in the saturated zone and thereby increases the contact between the soil and the groundwater. The ease and low cost of installing these diameter air injection points allows considerable flexibility in the design and construction of the system. So this is about biosparging, and the next one is about bio-augmentation. As we discussed, biostimulation and bio-augmentation are there. The previous methods of biosparging or bio-venting, all these things, actually there were bio-stimulation methods in which the indigenous population is stimulated using nutrients and aeration. Whereas in case of bio-augmentation, it is a bioremediation. Frequently, it involves the addition of the microorganisms, indigenous or exogenous, into the contaminated sites. So there, we are supplementing the site or treatment with microbes that may be engineered or externally supplied from another site, and even indigenous, so that you will continuously supply the site with a continuous supply of different types of microbes or effective microbes for the treatment. And two factors limit the use of added microbial cultures in a land treatment unit. First one, non-indigenous cultures rarely compete well with the indigenous population to develop and sustain useful population levels. So that is one limitation. For example, if you are supplying a particular microbe, for example, you are supplying Pseudomonas bifida in one site, and it is known that okay, it will work on that site of contamination for the window. But if it can survive the existing pressure from the natural selection pressure from the naturally existence, it will be washed out. So for effective degradation, the population level of that supplied or externally supplied organism need to be maintained at high levels. If the competition is much higher, the natural population will wash the intruder out of that system. And in that case, you to provide a steady supply of the concerned organism or the external organism into the system to maintain that activity level. Then most soils with long-term exposure to the biodegradable waste have indigenous microorganisms that are effective degraders. If the land treatment, land treatment until unit is actually it is well managed. So normally, for example, you take the case of a land treatment unit somewhere or waste treatment unit. During the course of time, or even throughout the years of degradation steps, actually there may be natural microorganisms which may be evolved in a better fashion to treat that particular waste. So in that case, stimulation methods using the indigenous population, or even you can isolate and identify that particular organisms, and you can culture them on amplify them. Then again you can supplement or spray that or supply that back into the site as a bio for as a part of the bio augmentation. So you don't need to brought an external one into that one into the system. If the organism is not growing in that particular environment by simple stimulation, you can identify the organism, you can culture them in large quantities, and then you supply it as an augmenter, so that the indigenous population itself can be used for a bio augmentation, and the indigenous population will have some technical advantage because it already evolved in that particular environment. So naturally it will survive there compared to the foreign organism or an organism which is introduced from some other site. So that is the 2 points. First one, for the non-indigenous culture, it is difficult to survive in competition with the indigenous population. And when you consider the indigenous population, there may be better candidates in the indigenous population itself who will be evolved during the long-term exposure or due to the long-term exposure to that particular contaminant in that particular site. So it's better to use that organism or the indigenous evolved organism for that purpose. Then it is better to use that one. This is a saturated subsurface materials. So in this case, in situ bioremediation is done. This is a treatment unit. Here, this is the contaminant site. This is the aquifers or water layer, and dissolved components will be leached out. And here, from the aquifers itself, you will pump it out, because the contaminant will leach out and reaches the aquifers, and that from the aquifers it will be taken out and pumped. Then aeration is done and treatment is done in the reactor, and that it will be reintroduced back into the system. So this is the in situ bioremediation process. So in this case, it is heavily contaminated, and the contaminants will leach out into the aquifers, and you can take along with the water from the aquifers, you can take it out. These contaminant can be taken out to the treatment site, then treat it and circulate back. So this is the schematic representation of the plume source management for the subsurface materials. Okay. Now we have a few more slides, I think, but today we can stop. Okay. We will discuss it later.